It was certainly explosive, and it was a documentary that leaves us all with so many questions. Joining Mike and I now is a man that's had a big battle with his son over the last 4 years, and he'll continue to do so as Ben's loving father for a long time. A pleasure and a privilege to have you on tonight, Mr. Bryan Cousins.
Thanks, Hamish. It's nice to be here.
A very private battle has become now very, very public. Why did you choose to do that?
Look, it was really, I suppose, Ben's decision from the outset that he initially started documenting his recovery, and then it sort of built into something much bigger than that. And when he asked the family to be involved, we did. And when I saw the end product, obviously, honestly, I felt uneasy and shocked about it. But as I know, he always said to me, I want to tell, the true story. And then I saw it, and I honestly think it can create not only a better understanding, I think it can encourage families to perhaps talk more openly about it when they see, here's this footy player who had the world at his feet, and he lost basically so many aspects of his life fell apart, and then there was the recovery aspect. And I think it does show, perhaps young addicts or addicts of any age, that there is a way forward. I mean, he's not out of the woods by, a long stretch yet, but he's certainly on the way. But it does, I think, show other young people that there is a way forward.
Today, the feedback has been that he is not remorseful, not contrite. It was very raw, part one, different part two. Can you believe the public reaction?
Yes and no. I think the issue of drugs, does polarise the community. I've got to be honest, 7 years ago, whatever, if someone had told me a young fellow had fallen foul of drugs in a similar manner to Ben, I would have had absolutely no sympathy for him, because that was how I thought. Now that I've got to understand the issue of drugs, that it is a health issue. Addicts don't want to be addicts. They want to get better. And I just think there is hopefully a change in attitude to how people, perceive drugs after tonight.
It's a harrowing tale. Was there a point at any stage when you thought, I will not see Ben alive again?
Without a doubt, I felt we were dealing with a life and death battle on a number of occasions, and I honestly feel that people sitting at home tonight that are the parents or family friends of someone as an addict would probably give the same answer. It's a tough battle, and I have the greatest admiration for any addict in the way they're fighting a battle, because I've seen him play footy, I've seen him do lots of things, but there's nothing I've admired him for more than the way he's approached this.
Bryan, as a fellow parent, I'm full of admiration for your work. I really enjoyed tonight's show. The bus shelter is a chilling story in more ways than one. Was that the lowest point of the last 5 years?
In a funny way, Mike, it wasn't. It was, on the night it was devastating. I was, highly emotional and drained, but in a way I actually think that was a step forward, because I went out with Ben when he needed to use. He was frantic to use again, and I went out with him, but I think he understood that I was on his team, and he did come back home, and he stayed at home during that recovery phase, and he certainly cleaned himself up and got his recovery process back on track. And I do think that was it. But probably, the worst moments for me were on the times when his drug taking was at its worst, when I had to go out on a couple of occasions when he had used for a number of days, and I'd get a phone call in the early hours of the morning from somebody to ask me to, that Ben had asked for them to ring me to come and collect him, and I saw this person that I knew it was Ben, but his eyes were back in his head like he hadn't eaten, he hadn't shaved. It looked like he was down and out, and so they were probably the worst times.
I know addiction is an illness. We understand that, and we understand it better now. Has Ben ever come to you and looked you in the face and said, "I'm sorry for the pain that I've caused"?
Not in the, said the word sorry. I honestly have never asked him to, or never expected him to. He probably did it, I think, in other ways, and I've always brought my kids up actually to say sorry is a word that I don't really enjoy in the English language, because I think too many people say sorry and don't mean it. I've always said to my kids, you show you're sorry by how you subsequently act. If you've done something wrong, you demonstrate you're sorry by how you act. But he did you know, on an occasion just prior to his comeback game with the West Coast when I met him, and he thanked me for all the support I'd given him, because he said to me, I know how much you detest drugs, and he thanked me for the great support that I had given him, and in essence that was sorry in probably the most important way to me.
When we saw that St Kilda had turned their back on him, and when it looked like they were going to take him, his quote was that it had sucked the life out of him. Richmond took him with the very last choice in the draft. There was no spot left after Richmond exercised the last choice. What do you think would have happened had Richmond not taken Ben?
To be perfectly honest, Mike, I doubt whether he'd be with us today. He had set his heart on playing footy, but I think more so than that, he'd set his recovery program on getting back, to football. And if that had happened, and I think the process that he went through where clubs were saying they were going to pick him up and then they didn't, it was one hit after the other, and he rightfully or wrongfully had the view that footy had abandoned him and they didn't want him back, and he thought, well, I've done the crime and I've done the time. And it was probably one of the most, dangerous is not the word, it was one of the most concerned times I felt for him.
Did he ever get suicidal?
Yes, he did.
Did he talk to you about it?
Yes. He did, and again, I remember speaking to my doctor, or our family doctor, Rod Moore, because I didn't know what to do. I actually almost pretended I didn't hear it, and I said, don't be stupid, or hardly made any response. And I spoke to our family doctor, Rod, and he said, that's not the way you deal with someone. You've got to go and address the issue and tell him how important he is to us, and you don't make those decisions, and you make sure you take it very seriously, which I did, and I ended up having a pact with him that if he ever felt like that he would always speak to me.
So isn't it funny's not the right word, strange though, that you're talking about that Ben, and yet so many people out there think Ben Cousins is smug, with a touch of arrogance and just this total belief in himself. Bulletproof is a word that's been used, invincible. He's obviously not.
No, he's not. And I think, Mike, one of the things I hope that this documentary shows is when people take drugs, it affects their brain. That's the part of the body that is affected by drugs. And I hope people have seen Ben in the various stages. I'm sure in some of the stages in the first episode, there are stages when he's in a withdrawal from taking drugs. He's sort of angry. I mean, it's a time he's been put out of footy. He's angry with the world, but he's withdrawing. He wants to use drugs, but he knows that he can't. And they see the impact of drugs, and if they probably compare that image of Ben through to when he perhaps made his retirement announcement, where he was calm and collected, that's what drugs is. It affects the brain. It is a health condition that affects of the brain, and I hope one of the things people get out of that is this understanding, and particularly parents that deal with their children that do these absolutely horrid things to them. I mean, I've heard so many times of young children stealing from loving parents, but they don't do that because they want to do it. It is the impact of the drugs. That's what it does to them.
We talk about education and seeing the science. You've admitted you knew very little. When was the first time you went from thinking, I've got a charismatic rogue that may dabble, to I have a drug addict as a son?
Hamish, there was, a time when Ben admitted to me drug usage, but he basically he didn't tell me, but he suggested I just become fully aware of how the world works today, that young people are a bit like when we went out after a game of footy and had a beer, that they do that, but every now and then they have a small amount of drugs, and it's nothing to be concerned about. Like a lot of people, I made the judgment he was playing good footy, he was looking healthy, and perhaps at that stage that's all he was doing, and I think that continued for some time, but it was probably about 6 to 12 months before it became public that I became aware that the problem was real serious.
And did he acknowledge to you, I have a problem? Did he lie to you?
No, he didn't lie to me, but he gave me, and I think other people that were supporting him, the view that he could deal with it himself. He said, yeah, look, I know I've got a problem, but I'm on top of it. And I think his, not so much his football performances and ability, but I think he had a reputation as a bloke that worked hard in the game. He was single-minded about what he did, and we assumed he could use those same skills in dealing with drugs.
Bryan, Chris Mainwaring was a hero, a mentor and a kindred soul with Ben. What was the impact of Chris's death on Ben?
Probably, you know, when I say indescribable, the bond he had with Mainey and his wife Rani, they, in the time leading up to Ben's issue becoming public, they were the two close friends of Ben, that's Chris and Rani, that were heavily involved in counselling him and supporting him and encouraging him to get treatment. Rani would ring me almost weekly discussing where we both thought Ben were at and, you know, whether we should put him into rehab or encourage him. Rani was always looking up, you know, rehab websites all around the world and sending them off to me or telling me to look them up. So the bond that he and Chris had was, you know, it was probably as close a friendship as he had in his life.
Much has been made of the AFL drugs policy, and we'll talk to Adrian Anderson later about that. To your knowledge, did Ben ever fail a drug test?
I am not personally aware. I don't think he did. I'm not aware of him ever failing a drug test.
And what's your view about the AFL's drug policy? I mean, I suspect in one way, given it's a three-strike, we may have seen this problem earlier if it were tougher, but it's got other advantages, has it?
Look, I think it has, Mike. Albeit that people may see me as a victim of perhaps an AFL drugs policy that didn't work, but I'm opposed to zero tolerance for a number of reasons. I think you can't make a moral judgment on something that's a health issue, number one. Secondly, the most important thing is to assess, you know, the problem. If a young lad tests positive, it could be a one-off, or it could be someone that's in the early stages of spiralling out of control, and it's certainly not an issue where one size fits all, and it's most important the counselling process gets underway dependent on what is required for the person. So I believe 3 is about the right number. I'm not totally familiar with what the AFL do on each of those strikes, and that's probably where I probably lack the knowledge. But
can you tell me how you felt when you either saw or realised that Ben had shaved his body down before the hair testing? I mean, it looked to a lot of us as if he was just thumbing his nose at the AFL. What was your reaction?
I really don't think it was thumbing his nose at the AFL. I think it was something that, the way that things were unfolding, he felt that everyone was out to get him. It was everyone in the administration of football. He had done the crime and he'd done the time, and I think he was, and to be perfectly honest, there was very little feedback to him of any support or encouragement to get back. I wasn't party to the decision, and when he came home, I was shocked that he did it. He had been to see a leading drug specialist in WA who'd suggested to him that the way he was doing it, they could still test if they were. I would think he had some concerns over whether he would test positive. But I think perhaps, you know, my biggest concern looking back is I didn't have any confidence myself that people understood the process of recovery. That the number of times I heard people talk about Ben having a relapse, as if that was the end of the world. You know, a relapse, and probably smoking is the best way to understand it. If somebody is a smoker, they've given up and they give up and they take it up again for 2 weeks and then they're clean again, that is sometimes an absolutely critically positive step in recovery.
Can I ask you one more? It's in the future, and we're all concerned. We all hope, obviously, that it turns out well. Mad Monday at the Richmond Football Club next Monday. Alcohol and whatever they do after. So I know they're much more mature about Mad Monday these days. You got any concerns about that?
I'd have to say, I couldn't say categorically I don't have any concerns. I would think, you know, the girlfriends of just about every AFL player would be uneasy about Mad Monday, and we'd be glad when, you know, Good Tuesday arrives. So, no, look, Ben's aware that his battle is not over. He has to be careful in the way that he does things. On the other side of the equation, he has built, I think, a tremendous bond with Richmond players, and I know he is looking forward to, you know, enjoying, you know, if you like, a farewell as a player with that group. So let's hope it all ends up well.
Going back to the very start, if Ben wasn't an AFL rock star, do you think he would have been a drug addict anyway?
That's a very difficult question, Hamish, but I think there is medical evidence to suggest that you can have a make-up where you are predisposed, if that's the right word, to addiction. And if you look through society today, and we concentrate perhaps on sportsmen with drugs, but there are doctors, there are airline pilots, there are school teachers, there are accountants, there are financial advisors, there are solicitors that have not only probably have drug problems, but have perhaps had huge drug addiction problems. So, you know, I think it possibly would have surfaced.
We've got to take a break, but this is an email that my mother wants to ask you. You're looking after Ben. Who's looking after you? Now, if I get emotional, it's a bit a hard one. The support crew that I have at home with my wife Stephanie and my son Matthew and my two girls, without doubt, Stephanie has been the absolute strength of our unit, because, as was seen on the documentary, it took a massive toll on me and on Melanie, but she was the one common denominator, and I'm sure it took a massive toll, but she was the one that held us together. And also, Hamish, as a family, we've had a lot of good things happen to us in our life, and so many families get hit with issues of all sorts of illnesses, and if this is the test that we've got to deal with, well, we'll deal with it, with all the energy and support that not only from our own family, but from our network of friends.
Break?
Break. Terry Wallace, Adrian Anderson, both still to come. After the break, a couple of experts talk about Ben Cousins.
When you go to state league games, you'll be part of the action. You get to listen to the coaches at three-quarter time.
As a young bloke, I think, every second bloke's talking about, playing in the AFL, so...
It's a chance. Jakovic applies the tackle. Here's Cousins, 30 metres out. The first game on. Yes! Well played by Kemp. Running out of room, Cousins. Brilliantly played by the youngster. Play on. The snap for goal. Sensational!
Bond. Only Bond. Pierce Brosnan is Bond. GoldenEye. Saturday. Father's Day last year, she got Dad a man bag. So she's getting the Geelong Trade Toolbox 3-pack for $69.95.
So what happened to his man bag?
Get into your local home timber and hardware.
The proper hardware store.
Autobarns is having a Father's Day sale. 5-litre Castrol GTX 20W50, $12.99. Top Gear projection alarm clock, $49.99. And the poorly capped for only $5. Don't be a dummy, because Autobarns has all the new arrivals. Number one for dads.
The e-Commodore is finally in run out at OGR Holden. You'll save a minimum of $9,500 and get extras like leather appointed seats, 18-inch alloy wheels, Bluetooth integration, performance and economy with SIDI technology, and safety with a 5-star NCAP rating. Sedans from $33,990 drive away and wagons from $35,990 drive away. Get in before the price goes up. Commodore, may the best car win.
Whitehead's Timber Sales, your family-owned timber grower, treater and supplier. Everything from pine boards, fence palings and pickets, to lattice, garden sleepers and structural timbers. Natural timbers, CCA treated or eco wood. Ask them for advice on your next pergola project. They manufacture any timber product, including cubby houses, dog kennels and more. Whiteheads are your complete timber provider with the most competitive prices. Whitehead's Timber Sales. More hardware, more timber. Eucalypt Drive, Mount Gambier.
Time for a break? Then make the time and head for the Shipwreck Coast. It's the heart of the Great Ocean Road. And now is the perfect time to enjoy all its wonders. Make time for yourself, your partner, your family. Divine. And the spectacle of the Great Ocean Road is just a few steps away. Visit shipwreckcoast.com.au for some divine deals.
Win News is local news.
Around $120,000 was raised.
This project in particular was a fairly big project.
News about people you know. Win News, weeknights at 6 and midnight.
He becomes quite scattery, his whole body jumps, he twitches, and it's just, it's frightening to see someone not being able to control themselves.
Ben Cousins in a terrible state. Time for some experts' views. Michael Carr-Gregg, adolescent psychologist. Great to have you in the middle.
Good evening.
CEO of the Drug Foundation is back, John Rogerson.
Good to be back, and it's great to be back with Bryan.
He's answered a lot of questions. His knowledge?
Look, it's his knowledge, but where there's great suffering, and there's been huge suffering here, there's great love. And this man and his love for his son is just, it's wonderful to see. And the message to parents around love and this issue being a health issue, there's been too much rubbish said today on the radio. The shock jocks have had a field day, and it's time we treat these people as people, and we don't have to keep judging them. They're just people who need our support and care.
Michael, addiction, is it curable or is it treatable?
Look, this is a chronic, relapsing condition, subject to relapse and resistant to treatment, and you've seen that now. I think it's about, for Ben in particular, managing this condition on an ongoing basis. I don't think we should talk about cure.
John, we talk about the use of drugs. I've got an email in a moment, which, Mike, I think you're going to be very interested in. How many Australians have tried drugs?
If you look at ever in their life, around 38%.
Cocaine?
Ever in their life, 6%, 1.6% in the last 12 months.
What about marijuana, perceivably the softer?
Well, it's a softer, but it's the most widely used drug, around 9% of Australians. I think the other point here, Hamish, is that since 1995, drug use in this age group of Ben's age group, 20 to 29-year-old men, has dropped 30%. So the number of users using drugs has declined. So it's there are some positives here, but we still have a massive issue with illicit drugs. We can't forget the alcohol issue. It is huge in this whole story, so we need to talk about that at some point.
Does alcohol fuel the drugs?
There's no doubt about that, and if you talk to Adrian around the testing, all bar one of the tests positive around illicit drugs have involved huge amounts of alcohol. And the issue around drugs in our community, it's big around illicit drugs, but it's much bigger around alcohol, and that's the other message for parents. It's about role modelling strong behaviour around their use of legal drugs, tobacco, alcohol and pharmaceuticals.
Bryan, alcohol for Ben, was it always the catalyst for the bender once he'd tasted drugs?
Well, I was never probably with him. I never understood Ben had an alcohol problem, certainly in the early stages. I think as time went on and when things blew out of control with him, it would start with alcohol, he'd drop his guard, and then he would, move pretty quickly into illicit drugs.
Michael, are there warning signs, classic warning signs for addictions?
Well, there are, but what you have to understand, Mike, is that not all young people use drugs the same way, so it depends what stage they're at. There are the sort of really overt signs that many parents come to me with, like your garden hose gets shorter, suddenly the kids develop an interest in hydroponics, and you stumble into their bedroom, you're cleaning it, and you discover drugs. But much more common are the more subtle signs, where young people, and you really do have to be the world expert on your kid to notice some of these signs. Things like red eyes, suddenly the kid's got a lot of Visine and putting that in their eyes. You've got the psychological signs, so the depression, the withdrawal, decline in academic performance, and then you get the secretive communications, the new friends. These are some of the classic signs that I see.
What do you think parents will feel, having watched, those who have watched the documentary over 2 nights, will they feel it's beneficial for their kids, do you think, for their teenagers?
Look, 100 years ago, we sat around fires and we told stories, and there's huge power in the narrative. This documentary is a teachable moment. This is where we should start the conversation. We can't brush it under the carpet anymore. There's been too much of that. And as John said, we've got to stop demonising people who have an illness.
Are some more susceptible to addiction than others? Genetic, physical, other?
I think the interesting thing here, drug use doesn't discriminate. Rich or poor, young or old. And we've seen one of the best athletes we've seen running around AFL for 25 years have this issue. But there's so many other people in our community facing the same issue with different social advantage, they're disadvantaged, a whole range of things. So that's one of the reasons why we have to stop the demonising.
Bryan, the biggest lesson so far you've learnt from Ben's experience?
Biggest lesson from Ben's experience is, I suppose, as a parent, I mean, I regret not knowing as much about it as I did. I think that would have alerted me to a lot of the warning signs. And probably the other biggest lesson is, when there was an issue, is I wish I had sought professional advice earlier than I did.
And look, this I think is a really important point for every parent out there and every person who may have a problem or just want to talk about it. There's phone numbers right around this country that will give people one-on-one support and advice. And I know you're putting them up. If you don't want to talk to someone, there's online web services, and there's also the Australian Drug Foundation Information Service, and it's all online. So these people will help people develop strategies to cope with their parents, or just talk to people.
Given you're not going to be there when your child first is offered drugs, how do you prepare them for that moment?
I think you have to have the conversation. You have to use this documentary as a way to prepare them for that. What would you do? Tell them your own story.
Bryan, can I ask you what you see as the most critical issue for Ben from here, at the end of the football and the support that he's had around him and the disciplines in a football club? What's your biggest concern now?
Oh, the biggest concern, well, it's obviously a change in his structure. He has to, I think, work very hard to have a structure in his life. I think he is a person, his nature is he throws himself headlong into everything that he's done, and that's good and bad. The bad issues he unfortunately threw himself into. And I would also hope he continues the counselling that he has had. That I think that's a very important issue, the ongoing counselling for him. Obviously not as extensive as he's had it when times were at their worst, but I think it's important he continue with that.
Bryan, if Ben was 10 now, how would you parent differently?
Well, I spoke at a function in the country over here 12 months ago, and probably I didn't use the best words, but I finished off by saying that I said, if there's any young parent here or any intending parent, I said, I think you are derelict in your duties as a parent if you do not have some knowledge, you know, of drugs. So I would do that, and just make sure, and as Michael was talking about, the warning signs. And I think, you know, when I look back, there were warning signs for me that I didn't realise were there, but now that I know, when I look back, they were certainly there.
There's been a myriad of emails and Twitters, Mike. One for you in a moment. This one is for you, either John or Mike, actually, now that I look at it. How has Ben addicted to drugs when he said he didn't take them on game day or before a game? He chose when he would use drugs. That can't be classified as addicted. As if he was addicted, he'd have to use drugs and he wouldn't have control. That's from Simon Butler.
Well, most people assume addiction is that you're using every day, 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 times, whatever. But you can have addiction that where a substance controls you, and Ben's is a classic case. He went for a month sometimes before he had the huge bender on illicit drugs. So this is where it really helps people understand the issues involved if they understand and try and break down some of these stereotypes we have around what drug use is really like.
One off the Twitter. Bryan, I don't know whether you're a Twitterer, but... Bryan, what would be the one thing you would tell parents of kids who experimented or taken interest in drugs?
So
what would be the one thing you would tell a parent that has a son or a daughter that's taken interest and experimented?
Well, I think, you know, communication with them, and if you can encourage them to speak about it. I mean, if it develops into a problem, I think one of the things you have to do is make sure that they are aware it's their problem. You know, you'll support them, but they have to understand their issues, and I think it is honestly all about, you know, the education, and one of the things I hope this documentary does. Ben started off as a person who just experimented. I mean, his first time of taking drugs was probably with a few mates at school, I don't know. But it can develop into, you know, the issue which, you know, changed his life enormously.
Michael, I suspect at some point in Bryan's life he's wondered about his parenting, seeing the problem sitting in front of him. Is there a link? Is there a link between this illness and how you parent?
There are risk factors in families. We know that the kids I don't see are the ones that generally grow up with the communication that Bryan talked about, but they also feel safe, valued and really listened to, and there's been a really good conversation around the family's beliefs and values. And these kids are also living structured lives. They're busy, they've got what we call islands of competence. They're involved in art, music, dance, drama, sport. These are great protective factors.
Look, one of the other things, Mike, is the shame and guilt factor. Drug users, because they're judged harshly and their families are judged harshly as well, there's this shame and guilt factor, and that's the other reason why we need to stop the judging. We need to help people recover, and if we keep judging them, they won't do that. And it's with parents as well. I'm sure you must have felt that, Bryan. In fact, it'd be interesting just to sense your response around this.
I am sure that people, that when they became aware of Ben's issue, and they were close, they did not know whether to bring it up with us, not talk about it, or whatever. I had a couple of close friends who did want to talk about it, and, you know, I actually felt good about talking about it, because I was flying blind for quite some time, but this way we have treated addiction, and it's a taboo subject, and if anyone's child or family member had an illness, you would offer them support. If they had they had a drug addict in their family, you know, you didn't actually even have any sympathy for them. You wouldn't feel any empathy for them.
Michael, your 3AW colleague, Neil Mitchell, expressed what I would now consider to be an ignorant view this morning. Mm-hmm. Will you challenge him about it?
I'll certainly have a conversation with him. I don't think he was the worst today. I think there were others. My mum always used to say to me that some people drink at the fountain of knowledge, others just gargle. I think there was a bit of gargling today.
Mothers are coming up a bit at the moment. How is Ben's mother?
She has done an amazing job. She's coming over on the weekend. Ben's probably loves having her in Melbourne more than anyone else, so if she comes over, she cleans and cooks. But no, she's, I think she, like me, I think she's extremely proud of the way he has tackled, you know, an issue.
Last one, John, we're going to take a break. A question for you from the Twitter. Such is life, Ben, or suchislifeben@7.com.au if you're wanting to send either a Twitter or an email. What an eye-opener. I have a question for the experts. What is rehab involved? What measures now are taken so Ben doesn't relapse?
Well, look, I think Bryan's alluded to the counselling and support, and if he relapses, further support, rehab, whatever's required. If we look at the issue of giving up tobacco, tough issue for anyone, and we need to be patient and support this guy. He needs our care and our love, and we as a community need to provide him with that.
Mike, that email I was talking about is still coming. Don't worry about it. John, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Michael, pleasure to have you in.
Thank you.
On the other side of the break, Terry Wallace. He threw Ben the lifeline. He's an important part of Ben's life. He's up next.
He's been everywhere, Cousins, in this term. 52 metres out, heads for home. There's still length in that kit. He's floating on air, Ben Cousins.
The winner of the 2005 Brownlow medal is Ben Cousins, the West Coast Eagles.
It's all about, you know, a grand final and winning a premiership.
She might be new at the spy game.
It's one of those jobs where nothing's ever easy.
But she's a natural when it comes to sexpionage.
Sure you want to do this?
If she thought her first day on the job was hard, yes, the red-hot action is just heating up. New Covert Affairs, Monday.
Father's Day last year, she got Dad a man bag. So, she's getting the Red Centre barbecue for $369. So, what happened to his man bag? I don't know.
Get into your local home timber and hardware.
The proper hardware store.
So, from the quarterly figures, we see that
if you've only got one thing on your mind after breakfast, you should try delicious Special K Advantage, high in fibre and protein. Advantage. Try it and see if you feel fuller for longer.
Computer price breakthrough at Harvey Norman. Hot on hot scoop purchase. Get this top brand Acer notebook with Core i5, 1GB graphics and Windows 7 Home Premium. Massive price breakthrough, $798 after cashback. Stock won't last. Don't delay. Get into Harvey Norman now.
Go!
These roads can take us anywhere. Who else on that, babe? We don't care. I got blue
from history.
Gives relief from distressing allergy symptoms, helping you to think, breathe and see clearly from one morning right through to the next. Arius, for brighter mornings and better days.
I'm a runner, and when you run, the impact on your knees, feet and ankles can be damaging. Fitprint shows us how your foot moves from the time you hit the ground. So it's important to get the right shoe and the right fit to disperse that shock. Brooks Goes 3 delivers more cushioning and stability thanks to HydroFlow, Biomogo midsole and an upper that hugs your foot for a custom fit feeling. So matching your foot with the right technology means the perfect fit. And I never met a foot I couldn't fit.
Every IGA is different.
Because we all like different things.
Local produce.
Fresh veggies.
Breakfast. Quick meals. Cabbage.
Sprouts.
More savings.
Big wins.
Sorry.
How the locals like it.
So, what do you think?
Steel line, steel frames and trusses. Won't rot, warp or twist.
Termite and borer resistant.
Lightweight, easy to handle and install.
And offers one of the highest strength to weight ratios of any residential building material.
Made to exact specifications from quality through-core steel.
Steel line, truss and frame. Ask your local builder today.
Perfect.
Steel line Mount Gambier, for service over and above.
Prostate cancer is one of the biggest killers of men in Australia. With your support, the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia can continue working towards finding a cure. Help us continue the vital work we're doing by hosting a barbecue this September and donate at prostate.org.au. We want to ensure that loved ones aren't left behind. The difference is you.
I decided or knew that the only way out of this chaos and mess was to get back to training, to get fit and to rely on the structure and foundation that football provided.
Just look at the players, look at the emotion and all that.
As we get a year further away from that shitstorm, I have even greater appreciation for the role that Richmond have played in my life. And I say my life, because not my career, it's my life.
Welcome back to Such Is Life. Bryan Cousins, our special guest tonight, with Mike Sheahan on the end, two very special guests in the middle. Firstly, Terry Wallace, the former coach of Ben Cousins. Great to have you on, Terry.
Hamish, how you going?
Yeah, very well. It's been a big couple of days.
Yeah, look, it has been. I mean, it's all been built around this, and plenty of media attention to it all. But I just hope people get a proper understanding of where it's been and the journey.
Sitting next to Terry Wallace, the CEO of the Richmond Football Club, Brendan Gale. Great to have you on.
Pleasure, Hamish.
Bryan, I want you to repeat what you said earlier. If the Richmond Football Club didn't pick up Ben Cousins, where do you think he'd be now?
Yeah, I honestly believe, it would be gravely doubtful whether he would be with us today.
Terry, when you selected Ben, the last man in the draft, did you have any idea of the significance of what you were doing?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, there's a couple of parts of this. I mean, first up, my knowledge and I think even the club's knowledge of the drug intake and the whole scenario of it, we weren't, well enough versed to be able to sort of say where it was going to end. But certainly, I had to put a submission to the board, and there was a few parts of that were obviously about the marketing and all those, the nicer bits. But the last conversation we had, the last word that I had to the board before we went was the human side of things, which was the 5th point. And the last thing I said to the board was, if we step away from this, and we had no obligation, if we step away from this, I believe that there's a likelihood that something will go wrong within the next 3 to 6 months. And could the board, with that decision at hand, lay their heads on the pillow at night and be able to sleep comfortably if somebody who was a great of our game did something tragically wrong?
Brendan, you were at the Players Association as chief executive at the time. You're now the Brisbane Richmond chief executive. Had you been at Richmond, would you have endorsed the move to take Ben?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, at the Players Association, we're very supportive of Ben's
well, what we perceived as his right to play AFL football again. Yeah, I guess, you know, let's not forget he was a wonderful footballer, and he still had enormous value to add to any side. And I think we lobbied and very hard for him to be given that opportunity. And behind the scenes, we were so thankful that Richmond did give him the opportunity. And as a former player, many years ago, I was very proud of the leadership at the time who made that decision. And yeah, had I been in the shoes, I would have done the same thing.
Now, his father believes if he had a full pre-season in the upcoming summer, he could play his best season at Richmond. Were you? What did you feel when the question of his future came up? Were you keen for him to play on, or did you think the time was right?
It's funny. I mean, I had a couple of chats with Bryan over the last few weeks, and you know, talked with Ben as well. But ultimately, it was a football decision, and a football decision very much involving Ben. And I think the football department, you know, Craig Cameron, Damien Hardwick, etc., were open to him playing. But I think the more you know they considered it, and the Ben considered it, the more he thought it was right to go out in a high. And I think he's worked very hard to get himself in a position where he can go on to, you know, the next stage of his life.
Brendan, you're CEO of the Richmond Football Club. What is the biggest issue of employing a drug addict?
Well, you know, it obviously takes a lot of work, but you know, as far as we're concerned, you know, an addiction's an illness, and there's a lot of people go to work every day with illnesses, and a lot of people, you know, the law and medicine, etc. And so, you know, I think part of the decision at the time made by the club was whether, you know, the support structures were in place, and I think when you know, seeing the documentary the last couple of nights, I think, you know, the wonderful family and Bryan and Stephanie and the experts around him, and I guess with the structures the club had in place, and Terry would have been familiar with those, I think, you know, the club was confident in its ability to, you know, support Ben.
And it's manageable? It's easy enough if you've got the structures in place?
Well, you know, you've got
a lot of CEOs around the place concerned now. Can you help them?
Yeah, but look, I think our industry, our football industry, philosophically, you know, I think we know a lot more about drugs, and we're all a lot more informed. And I think philosophically, I think there's a view that, you know, the best you can do is to include, to support, and to educate, to inform and communicate, rather than, you know, alienating and punishing. And, you know, if it's all the informed view, and Michael Carr-Gregg and etc., so that's the way to deal with addiction. And I think as an industry, I think we're much more informed.
Terry, the timing, as always, seems to be perfect. You knew the hair test was a giveaway, and you needed to do it anyway.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of sides of that. I think in the documentary, Ben mentioned that he probably would have been better off to lie and perhaps just sort of say everything was okay. We had done our due diligence along the way. We knew exactly what was going on with Collingwood and where that whole scenario with the investigation was going. If Ben came to us and told us lies about where he'd been and where his state of play was, which included, you know, shaving his head, we would have had to cut the ties at that stage. We just needed him to be honest so that we knew what we were dealing with. We didn't care about what had happened prior. What we wanted to know is when he stepped in the doors at Punt Road, would he do the right thing?
Ben's honesty, Bryan, has almost brought him undone a couple of times, hasn't it?
I would think so. He's always, I think, been pretty upfront about his issue. How he's dealt with it is probably the thing I admire about him the most. I know he did have a concern, and this is prior to, you know, Richmond giving him the lifeline, that perhaps, you know, and it was what was written in the media, but perhaps, you know, people didn't understand the issue of drugs. The number of times I had people contact me and say, look, so-and-so's not interested anymore because he'd relapsed. And whether he had or not, I don't think people understood relapse. And if I could just speak probably more generally and specifically about Ben, that, you know, a relapse is so much, can be a part of someone's recovery. And I think I've used the example earlier tonight about smoking. It can be an essential part of the recovery, but people were saying, oh, if he's relapsed, that's the end of him. But
Brendan, I've expressed some misgivings about Ben's and Richmond's version of events with the caffeine tablets and the sleeping pills. Are you totally happy with the published version of what actually happened?
I am, Mike. We have no reason to doubt otherwise, and we relied on the version of events that were provided to us, and you know, the people in the hospital, and so, you know, absolutely satisfied from that point of view.
Terry, Ben's famous quote, idle hands are the devil's tools. You've left 2 clubs and I assume you've had a lot of idle time as a result. Do you fear for what Ben is going to experience in the next few weeks?
Look, it's not a good time for anyone to be going through that. Particularly, I mean, this industry is so publicly profiled, and then you step away from that. You know, I'm a couple of decades older than him, and I went through my own times. Nothing near what you know, where Ben's been. But certainly, it's a difficult time. If I had any advice for Ben, it is get yourself occupied and get yourself busy. That you just haven't got that time, because close yourself in, and something's going to give somewhere along the line. You know, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a gambling addiction because you've got extra time, whether it's a drinking problem, whether it's you know, the drug scenario that Ben's been through. Just keep yourself busy.
Brendan, what lessons do we learn from the Ben Cousins chapter? And on a broader sense, do you believe there's a problem in the AFL with players and drugs?
Before, Brendan, you asked that.
Well, you've got an email from me.
This is going to get this away, but it is also for all of you. And Terry, great to have you here for this as well. I can't believe you guys keep saying how much of a problem it was at West Coast. It is a massive problem at every club. It always will be, and you guys don't get out and see the scene these days. It's terrible. That's from Josh.
Well, look, two things about that. That because it's a massive problem doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't a big problem at West Coast. So I'm still sticking to that story. But I agree. I mean, I've had 4 kids go through their 20s and into their 30s now, and they thought I was extremely naive. The great thing about what we've done in the last 48 hours is that this is going to enlighten a lot of people. And it's going to have us debating with experts about the problem. And hence my question to you, A, is it a problem? And B, what lessons do we learn?
Well, I'll answer the last first, but I think you know, as footballers, they're put up in pedestals and they're invincible, and that's a perception. But I think you know, what Ben highlights is human beings. You know, we're all dealing with our problems. We've all got faults and shortcomings and vulnerabilities, and clearly addiction is one of those. But you know, I think full credit to Ben. Just for his, I guess, willingness to sort of persevere and to keep trying, and you know, the game of competing and the love of family, and you just don't give up. You know, and that's the great lesson. You just don't give up, and you don't give up on anyone. And as far as the broader issue, look, I don't. You know, when I was at the Players Association, you know, anecdotally, I was hearing some disturbing things around 2004, 2005 across the board, and that was probably reflective of general society. I was supportive of the introduction of a listed drug policy. That's one of the things I was proudest of in my time there, and I think that's led to a reduction in drug use, and I think it's been instructive broadly. And as I think John mentioned before, you know, drug use has reduced.
Terry, do you think there's a problem with the AFL players more so than society?
Well, look, I mean, first up, all you can do as a senior coach is study the group as they come to training each and every day, and sort of see whether, you know, how you sort of feel that they are. And you know, I've never had a real issue in looking at my players. But the one thing that I would say is that from when Ben started, and Adrian will probably speak about this more, but from when Ben started, the testing regimes have gone up. In my 5 years as coaching Richmond, from where it started, where it was a shock if you actually saw a drug testing agent come into your football club. I mean, they were just a welcome part of the furniture by the end of it. They were there every 3 and 4 days, and that's not only in the scenario of Ben. I mean, obviously he was getting tested 3-4 times a week, but it just ramped up a heck of a lot more than what it was certainly 5 to 10 years ago. Terry,
did you have any apprehension that you were bringing an addict to the club and the disease or the drug use may spread?
No, I didn't, because we had a lot of conversation with Ben about where he was at and what he did. He was more a loner in that factor of it, particularly coming to Melbourne and particularly not knowing you know, the guys at the club. He's got to know them very, very well now. But look, I didn't have that as an issue. I mean, we had a lot of issues about could he get his way through it, but certainly that was never ever a worry for us.
Brendan, do you think that the football industry should engage Ben, and I don't mean to be good blokes and just sort of try to sort of nurse him, but has he got a role to serve with the AFL or with a particular club, do you think?
Look, ultimately that's up to Ben, Mike, and you know, I think Ben's an addict and he's still dealing you know, with his own issues, and you know, it's going to be a challenge, particularly as he transitions out of football. But you know, I guess having regard to his experience, you know, he's extremely bright, intelligent, articulate, charismatic. I think he'd be a tremendous asset to the industry, to society, if he wanted to do it, and if it was a meaningful role. And there's been a lot said about let's keep Ben involved in footy, but I think, I think it's got to be a really meaningful role, and ultimately it's got to be up to him.
Time for a break. Brendan, thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Hamish.
Terry, well done.
Thanks, Hamish.
After the break, Adrian Anderson. How did he beat the system? Well, we'll find out.
A standing ovation for Ben Cousins. Haven't seen that too many times, but after 15 weeks of absence, Ben is back.
Cousins immediately back into the heart of things, putting McVeigh under pressure, holding the ball.
Cousins finds a way, as he so often does.
The Eagles win, but it's another classic. And Ben Cousins' comeback will be remembered as long as football is played in the West.
So, you think you're okay to drive on drugs? You're more alert, more cautious? No, you're in control. Then ask yourself, would you hop on a plane if the pilot was doing speed?
Don't panic. It makes me more alert.
If your surgeon was stoned, would you be worried?
Relax. I'm more careful when I'm out of it.
What if he'd been popping ecstasy all night? You wouldn't trust him on drugs either. So why would you trust yourself?
Floating down the river on the raft of life, got my bag on my shoulder with my trouble and strife, riding on the water with no need to steer. Flow mama, have no fear. Give me rope, give me hope, give me something clear.
We'll keep you talking, we'll keep you online, we'll keep you working, making up time. Green Triangle Electronics, for all your office equipment needs, supplying tomorrow's technology today. Green Triangle,
helping you every step of the working day. Green Triangle Electronics.
Weighing up your home loan options? The flexibility and choice you get from a broker, or the services and security of a bank? There is another way. Australian Central provides you with a choice of loans from our panel of lenders, plus the strength and security of a full range of financial services. So we're better than a broker and better than a bank. And with a great rate like this, your choice is even easier. Australian Central. Drop in, call 13 13 21 or visit happytalkhomeloans.com.au.
Switch to LPG and save $300 with a new Renai Infinity 26 continuous flow hot water system. This 5-star water heater is energy efficient and kind to the environment. That's why L-Gas is offering a $200 instant discount when you switch from electricity. Plus, you'll receive a $100 rebate from Renai. So the Infinity 26 is just $874, including a bonus universal controller. So call your local L-Gas centre today on 131 161.
Some things work better when you have more room to move. Introducing new Lipton Large Leaf. With pyramid bags, the leaves have more room to move, making your tea absolutely delicious. The tea you've been waiting for. Lipton tea can do that.
Dear America. Dear Russia. Dear North Korea.
Dear France.
Dear Israel. United Kingdom. Pakistan. India. Dear China. Please. 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 Please.
Please free the world from nuclear weapons.
The AFL expected me to come across in a way that gave a perception that I was cured. that all my problems had been solved by this year off. Right through this process, I haven't bullshitted about my condition. To say, I'm still an addict, and I'll always be an addict, is not what they wanted to hear.
Welcome back to Such Is Life. Ben's father, Bryan, is our special guest tonight with Mike Sheahan. And joining us now, Adrian Anderson, Football Operations Manager. Great to have you, Adrian.
Thanks, Harry.
The obvious question first. If Ben had been using since 1996 as a 17-year-old, how did he not get caught?
Yeah, well, look, firstly, I think the most relevant thing is the fact that he didn't turn up to training when their drug testers were there in early 2007, led to his first rehabilitation. So the system did actually flush out the issue and was constructive in that regard. Secondly, Ben admitted, I think, in the first episode that he started taking drugs 1996, 17-year-old at school. The AFL's illicit drug policy didn't commence until 2005, 2006, some 10 years after this issue had started. So we were the first sport at the time to undertake out-of-competition testing for illicit drugs. We've always had testing match day like every other sport. Take cocaine match day, you're out for 2 years. But we were the first sport to introduce testing out of competition in Feb 05. Within 2 years, that issue had been flushed out. And I think, importantly as well, we were learning as well. We did about 450 tests the first year, and we subsequently revised. We do triple the number of tests. We've targeted recovery sessions. We've introduced hair testing, and we've got a lot better at it, and we continue to learn. So hopefully a young Ben Cousins coming into the system today would be detected and helped, because that's the purpose of the policy.
The question a lot of people have is, why does the AFL have an illicit drug policy? Dentists don't, lawyers don't, financial institutions don't, but it's saved a few lives.
Yeah, we believe we've got an obligation to look after our players. I mean, they're taken from all around the country at the age of 18 because they're good at footy. And they're put in an environment, as we've seen with Ben, where they're getting a reasonable pay, and they have some of the trappings of success at a young age. So we think we've got a real responsibility to their health and welfare to try and look out for them. And to the players' credit, I think enormous credit, to be the first sportsman in the country to say, yes, and Brendan talked about it before, yes, we are happy to be tested when no one else isn't out of competition for illicit drugs. Huge step, and one that's now being followed overseas to a large extent.
Adrian, were you too slow heeding the warning bells from Perth about Ben and about his football club?
Look, I think as Bryan said, one of, and I must say on behalf of everyone at the AFL, the huge admiration we have for the love and support Bryan's given to Ben is just outstanding. And as Bryan said, that in hindsight, you could have seen some of the warning signs. You'd love to have been alert to things quicker. But I think, we shouldn't forget that it was a huge step for the AFL to undertake, and the players to undertake, to have testing out of competition begin in 05. And if that hadn't happened, I'm not sure that the problem would have been flushed out in 07 when he failed to turn up to training.
Gee, there was a lot of speculation about the problem in Perth. A heap of we all knew it. The people in the media knew about it. It just seemed to us that you didn't want to act. It was sort of 2,000 miles away, and let's leave it there and hope it goes away.
Yeah, well, we did act, Mike. I think that's the really important thing.
I'm talking about in the first half of the decade.
Yeah, well, look, it's hard for me to reflect going back that far in time. From the period I've been involved, and this is 1 year after starting, the AFL undertook, with the players' support, to test players out of competition for illicit drugs. A huge step. There's still only 3 sports in the country that are doing it. And I think that's was a really positive step, and even in the isolated example of Ben's case, hopefully led to him getting support earlier rather than later.
Bryan, we've spoken about this a little. Zero tolerance versus the 3-strike policy. How important is the 3-strike to you and to Ben now?
Look, I really endorse Adrian's comments in regard to the policy in general, and I am a supporter of a 3 strikes policy for no other reason. This is about, education and detection, and particularly if a player does test positive, that he is thoroughly assessed to determine, where he's at and appropriate programs. you know, are put in place to give that person the best opportunity of a recovery. I really don't fully understand the extent of what a zero tolerance policy of whether they're named, they're shamed and they're put out for whatever period of time. But I think doing that is making a moral judgment of what I think is a really important health issue.
A lot of emails and Twitters have come in tonight on the subject of the Eagles premiership. Was it tainted? Ben said he didn't. Have you had a separate conversation with Ben about using cocaine on match day, which, Adrian, is a performance-enhancing drug if it's taken on match day?
No, I mean, I saw in the documentary what he said. I have never been aware of him, you know, taking drugs. I mean, leading up to, you know, this becoming public, I was never aware of him taking drugs, you know, in a part of a football season. You know, I mean, when I've seen the documentary and he's told me about it, how, you know, he used to have his periods of a time, and when he had an opportunity to have a weekend, he did, but I am not aware of any time that he took it.
So you did speak about when he had the opportunity in a gap and he thought he could escape the testing, he'd abuse that or use that, or...?
Yeah, I think that they learned that if they played on a Friday night and then the following Friday night, and then perhaps they didn't play the following Sunday and they got a weekend off, that they would target that period of time and think, well, that's a weekend that we can use.
Adrian, when Ben shaved down, did that jeopardise his chances of being reinstated?
Absolutely. It caused some real concern. And I think to the Commission's eternal credit, I mean, they knew, and as Bryan talked about, you know, that relapse can be part of recovery. They knew that, obviously, that something was amiss in him doing that. But based on medical advice, as we've followed all the way along, we're prepared to give him that opportunity based on what the doctors told us was the best thing for him and that it was appropriate at that time to give him that opportunity. A brave decision.
Yeah, and particularly when Ben actually had the view, and he expressed the view in the documentary, that he thought you guys were out to get him.
Yeah, look, I think, I'm not sure Ben will ever understand the extent to which the AFL medical officers and the AFL generally has really gone out on a limb to endeavour to support him and provide him with an opportunity that hopefully for the long term is to his long-term benefit.
Bryan, do you think it was a big risk on the AFL's behalf to allow Ben to be re-registered, but even before a club took him on?
Look, obviously there was a risk involved, but I think this comes back to the core issue of someone that is an addict. If he actually perhaps had another illness or some other problem and he was in any other industry, he was a carpenter or whatever, I would have thought the appropriate workforce body that would look after that particular work would encourage that person to get back into the safest and best environment, which would be part of their recovery process. And I think we have to take drugs out of a separate, you know, category and treat it in a manner which we would look at other, you know, problems. It just appears drugs is just put in one issue. You know, I think the AFL handled it, you know, in a manner which they gave him the opportunity to come back, and I hope this is looked on as a very positive program that they did, and in years to come that other players will perhaps benefit, you know, from this experience.
Adrian, I want to show you a bit of commentary now. Patrick Smith, one of the leading journalists in this country, was in the documentary. I want to ask you how he can be accurate or no after this.
And the AFL was seen to be really sensitive and fuzzy on this issue. Then when the problem didn't resolve itself, and then when Ben gets arrested in the middle of Perth, the AFL just simply said, we've got to cut this bloke. We've got this reputation, we've got a 3-strike policy on drugs, and here's a bloke who hasn't tested positive once, absolutely killing our image. And when you kill the AFL image, they kill you.
Patrick Smith, great journalist, generally pretty accurate. I want to know how he could be so adamant that Ben had no strike next to his name, because isn't it a very confidential process?
Yeah, look, the only people who know if there's a positive are the player and the AFL and club medical officers. But on the other point that is being referred to there, you know, it's not well understood that the Commission, even in suspending Ben for 12 months, as it was at the time, that was in accordance with the medical advice at the time as what was in his best interest, just as it was in accordance with the medical advice later on to say it is now the right time to give him another crack. So I think that the AFL, the Commission, has been true to the objective of the health and welfare of players as the fundamental objective of the policy, and that's why the players support it, because they see that. They've seen the number of positives now a quarter what it was when we started the illicit drugs policy in 2005. You know, you heard Terry talk about how much more the testers are out at the club, how they're out their recoveries, and how we're now doing hair testing. So, you know, we've listened to the experts very closely on what we should be doing, and we're seeing some great results, and we'll continue to learn and continue to try to get better at dealing with this very difficult issue.
Hamish, I'm equally adamant that Ben Cousins did test positive in 2007 when the drug testers finally caught up with a couple of people that they wanted to test at West Coast. So I can't claim unequivocally that that's correct, but I am as strong as Patrick in the opposite view.
And I should say, I think a bit of the confusion around this issue has come because you asked Bryan before about, you know, cocaine match day. ASADA came out and confirmed that they had tested Ben numerous occasions on match days, including in big finals, and every result had been negative. So in some circles, that then became, oh, he's never tested positive. But there's two separate policies, the match day one, which every sport has got, and the out-of-competition one, which is peculiar to the AFL and now a couple of other sports in Australia.
Do you think the drug policy in the public arena has got the credibility that it should have?
I don't think it's quite got the understanding yet. It should have, Mike, but I think every year, you know, we've been very transparent about it. We publish our results each year and usually get a little bit of a whack at the same time. But we believe what we're doing is right, and we've been true to the objective of the health and welfare of players, and it's working. So, you know, we think we're on the right track. We'll continue to listen to the experts, but it's such a difficult and emotive issue that it's bound to divide opinions, and, you know, we have to expect that.
Adrian, thank you for coming in and good luck for the rest of the year.
Thanks very much.
Adrian Anderson, time for a break. When we come back, we talk about Ben Cousins' future.
Cousins left standing. Here's trouble for the Blues. 35 metres out, gets his third.
Cousins, here's danger. Still with Cousins.
Fantastic stuff there from Cousins.
Don't tell me, Ben Cousins, you're a star!
Sure you want to do this?
If she thought her first day on the job was hard, yes, the red-hot action is just heating up. New Covert Affairs, Monday.
Couldn't live more than 3 minutes from real coffee.
I have no idea what to do with this.
Plenty of room. It's hard to get to. Maybe why it's the best-kept secret in town.
Don't tell anyone.
The new Mitsubishi ASX. It's the versatile, agile, city-size SUV.
Love that car.
Retrovision is giving away Fujitsu free money. Get up to $300 on selected Fujitsu inverter systems. Plus, someone will win $1 million payday, so hurry. Talk to your local Retrovision store.
Round 4 of the Australian Off-Road Championship is coming to the Limestone Coast. The Teagle Excavations ARB Pines at 0400. Local buggies, trucks and four-wheel drives take on national competition to survive 400 kilometres of wheel-to-wheel racing through the Pine Forest near Millicent. Mutineering Friday with a prologue, Dash for Cash and Top 10 shootout on Saturday. Then buckle up for the main event on Sunday. Buy a program for your chance to win a fast lap in one of the extreme off-road racing machines. The Teagle Excavations ARB Pines at 0400. Proudly supported by Win Television.
We're here to see how people react when they try new Colgate Sensitive Pro Relief. And I want you to rub some of this toothpaste on those areas where you feel sensitivity. Now, drink this ice water.
Oh, dear.
Go on, try it.
I don't feel any pain.
Now, that's amazing. I just want to know how it works.
Well, it's the Pro Argin formula that instantly seals the open channels to the nerves. With regular brushing, you get long-lasting relief.
When can you buy it?
New Colgate Sensitive Pro Relief for instant and lasting relief. Prove it to yourself.
This year, the official Royal Adelaide Show Guide is coming to you. The Show magazine is the ultimate guide to getting the most out of this year's show of shows. Keep an eye out for it in your mailbox or participating IGA stores.
Need hydraulics? Think Ryco. Think Drew's Workshop Supplies. For 100% performance, think Ryco, think Drew's. Drew's Workshop Supplies in Naracoorte. For all your Ryco hydraulic needs.
Some farmers wait a long time for rain, but here on the Limestone Coast, it rains on demand. Water Dynamics in Mount Gambier and Naracoorte will provide you with an irrigation system for your farm. From sourcing your water with the bore drilling service to the supply and installation of pumps. Water Dynamics for sales and service of centre pivot irrigators as well as specialised drip irrigation systems. Water Dynamics, Mount Gambier and Naracoorte. When every drop counts, call 1300 Water 1.
The V6 Orion ATX.
More?
You'll save thousands.
More?
Just $32,990 drive away.
Trust Toyota to give you more.
Today, more than 9 million Australians suffer from asthma and allergies. So to help you choose asthma and allergy-sensitive products, the National Asthma Council Australia developed the Sensitive Choice program. Now, all you need to do is look for this symbol. You'll find it on a wide range of quality products used in our homes every day. The blue butterfly. A sensitive choice for your family.
I think idle hands are the devil's tools, and, you know, I found myself, you know, having a drink, and then I think having a drink and then getting back to my old ways for a month, I think. And you can do a fair bit of damage in a month.
The final chapter of Ben Cousins' football career concludes on Sunday afternoon. You can catch it on 7. John Rogerson comes back in to answer some questions that we can't. Mike, nice to have you back, John.
Can I just make a comment? About the word addict. We keep using the word addict, and it's a judgmental term. I reckon we're better off saying that Ben's a person with a drug problem or a person with a health problem.
But Ben actually calls himself an addict. So would you counsel him to sort of desist?
I would. I think it's just part of how we label people. That's part of the stigma.
I understand that, and but Ben sort of has almost been boldly saying it.
Yeah.
And I think because he sort of says he doesn't want to hide anything.
No, and that's what people want to hear. And I guess this is part of our journey forward around this whole issue is let's have some really good conversations and we can deal with this issue like we've dealt with mental health and get it much more positive than what it is.
Bryan, Ben has a drug problem and he has a disease. Idle hands are the devil's tools, he said it. On Monday, how do you keep Ben very busy?
Oh, well, we've, through him and several people who've wanted to be involved in Ben's future, he does have some work opportunities coming up that are going to keep him extremely busy. So, you know, he's been very much an important part of the process, knowing that going forward he has to occupy himself. He needs something that's going to hopefully develop into a business passion for him, and through the support of a couple of pretty good guys from Perth, that opportunity is there for him.
He was a straight A student, went to university. What are his interests?
Well, I don't think he has anything specific in mind. So he's got to go and obviously find in the work position that I think he'll take up, which I probably don't want to disclose too much detail, but there's a fellow who has a business network which has a number of various businesses, and I think he's going to involve Ben in each one of them for a period of time with the view of one of them, you know, becoming a real interest to Ben, because I think his nature is that if he gets really involved in something, he will become very passionate and work at it very responsibly and actively.
Do you think he'll stay in Melbourne?
Certainly in the short term, and I think he'd like to stay here for the long term.
John, Bryan is looking after Ben. We touched on it earlier. How important is it for Bryan and the family and Steph and all of the family to have help?
Look, it's critical for anyone who knows someone who's got a drug problem, that the person with the problem needs support. There's lots of support available for these people, but we need to help people understand where to get that. So it's on the phone systems, it's on the web, but it's also just as critical for the parents, for the family. And there's all this guilt and shame, and we need to get over that and support these people deal with this issue.
John, what's the lesson for the authorities to take out of this?
The lesson for the authorities, look, we're dealing with people. We're dealing with people with a health problem, and let's support them. Let's care for them, and we've seen no greater care than this person beside me. Like, just outstanding love and care, and his whole family, his 2 daughters, his other son and his wife, just outstanding stuff.
Bryan, we've got to wrap things up shortly. A couple more questions. One, you have an opportunity to send a message to every parent and every potential user in Australia. What would you like to say?
Oh, I think to every parent to really try and understand this issue, and I really enjoyed the comments of John to take the stigma out of drugs and understand it is a health condition, to talk openly about it. For young people, I hope the message they got from Ben's documentary is for them to understand that you go down that path of the destruction to your own life that can occur. But very importantly, there is a way out. It's a hard road, but there is a way out of it. And I suppose one of the things that my main involvement is, obviously, since Ben became subject to his problem, is to young people to really think about how they're going to go about their lives, and they get a lot of education about what they should do to avoid taking drugs. But I'd also encourage them, whatever is the opposite of peer pressure, to parents play a big role. It's very important the parents talk, but I think it's very important the young people perhaps talk it amongst themselves, and they should be the ones that are encouraging each other to make sure that they stay out of issues that can have a damaging effect on their lives.
You know him very well. He said he was your best mate and vice versa in his press conference. Where will he be in 2 years' time? I have great faith in him. I said somewhere recently, I've had great enjoyment of watching him do a number of things through his life as he's grown up, but there's nothing I've admired him for more than the way that he has had to deal with, what I think is probably the toughest issue anyone can deal with in their life. You can get an illness that unfortunately takes toll of you that you can't do anything about. You can control this one, you can get on top of it, but it's this tougher thing, and I just admire him the way he's taken the fight up.
Bryan, we couldn't have a session without a hypothetical. Would St Kilda have won the flag in 2009 had they honoured or followed through with their plan to draft Ben?
I'm probably not in a position to answer that, but I probably would like to say one thing. The regret that I have from the footy clubs that approached Ben is, to my knowledge, not one of them took a drug counsellor or a counsellor knowledgeable in this issue. They came over to speak to Ben. He was honest. To my knowledge, he was very honest with him, and probably that honesty may have cost him a role. I also heard that sponsors, threatened to leave a club, and it's probably one thing I have great respect for the AFL, that, they have I understand, a wide range of educational programs for, their players, not only in the issue of illicit drugs, but in alcohol and, the treatment of women and gambling and things. And, if that was the case with sponsors, I would just hope they might relook at it, those sponsors that perhaps did, and say, hang on, there's a lot more to this issue than us just saying, oh, we don't want this person there because they're affected by drugs. I would hope that they would look at it and say, we would encourage our club to give this person a chance, and we want to be part of that process.
So you're referring to St Kilda? St Kilda was the club where the sponsors imposed their will?
Look, I can't remember back, Mike. I was aware there was a number of clubs, but I would then hear news reports that, that various clubs. I think that was a case for a number of clubs.
Last one. Will he play on Sunday?
Now, that's a difficult one. I honestly believe it's only 50-50, but if there's any way possible, I would think the Richmond Footy Club and he will make sure.
They've got those buggies now, Bryan. You can't take him on the ground on one of those.
You'll be there?
I'll be there. My wife and my daughters and son will all be there.
Thank you, Mike, for coming on. Wonderful
Pleasure,
to have
Hamish. I said it before, Bryan, but I think on behalf of, if I can speak for the footy community, we all admire what you've done.
No, I appreciate this. I appreciate the support we've had from not only the footy community, but from people. And the greatest support I've honestly had, Mike, and it's interesting, you know, having John here, the greatest support I've had has been from people I've never met that have come up to me and they've had to deal with a family member who's gone through what we've gone through, and they are the ones that understand it. And I just hope that what this does is make sure those people that haven't gone through it have the understanding that, you know, that people have that have gone through it, because it's something that I think it'll touch us all, you know, whether it's, you know, in years to come, you'll have someone you know that goes through it, and we just need to make sure we approach it in a different way we have in the past.
John, thank you for your time, information and education.
Yeah, if I can just comment about this man next to me, just fantastic. I want to talk about his son. Just what he's done, he's put it out there rawly, but he's helped a lot of people, and we need to really thank Ben for that. It's fantastic.
Bryan, thank you. Wonderful to have you on, and good luck.
Cheers.
For the rest of the battle. Bryan Cousins, hope you enjoyed tonight. Ben's response will be with Sandy Roberts tomorrow night on 7 News. If you have any doubts about yourself or your friends or your family, please go to adf.org.au. Hope you enjoyed tonight. Have a good evening. Bye for now.
I'd like to announce my retirement.
What a goal! Unbelievable!
I am forever indebted to the footy club for the opportunity to play football again.
The winner of the 2005 Brownlow medal is Ben Cousins, the West Coast Eagles.
The only way out of this chaos and mess was to get back to training and to rely on the structure and foundation that football provided.
He's floating on air, Ben Cousins. The West Coast Eagles are the premiers, and the Stars Cousins.
By walking away from the game now, I can walk away in a positive light.
Don't tell me, Ben Cousins, you're a star!
Get the place ready for a new season as Better Homes heads outdoors for our spring special. Dancing DIYer Rob brings the outside in with no fuss French doors.
They're a lot cheaper and easier than you might think.
Create simple spring meals, a beetroot rosti with smoked salmon, and Italian ice cream on a citrus salad.
Celebrate spring at your place.
And is it a home for hobbits?
This amazing dugout is saving one family a fortune.
The Better Homes Spring Special, Friday 7:30.
Get 20% off T-shirts for the whole family during Target's T-shirt Fest. Excludes underwear and sleepwear. Sorry. No rain checks.
Why is it that the price of my glasses tends to go up as I get older? It hardly seems fair to me.
That's why at Specsavers, if you're over 60, you'll get 30% off one pair of glasses, including lenses. Paying too much for glasses? Should have gone to Specsavers.
MaxiSpace Roadmaster Wardrobes. Attractive and functional wardrobe systems to suit your storage needs. An inexpensive alternative to built-in robes. Choose from 5 different finishes and a variety of door and shelf combinations. Available from Factory Direct Furniture.
Specialising in window solutions for over 27 years, Direct Blinds and Awnings service the Limestone Coast and Western District. They're authorised dealers of Luxaflex window fashions, Zip Track and a budget range, offering canvas and aluminium awnings, roller shutters, channelled pergola blinds, motorised awnings and more. They have the latest fabrics, colours, operating mechanisms, and their made-to-measure awnings will be the perfect solution to suit your situation. Protect your home, reduce energy costs and extend your living space with help from Direct Blinds and Awnings.
This is a subject most people don't want to know about. It's not easy being a mum. Make her life easier with OzzyClean, the leader in wastewater treatment, the only fully aerobic non-septic system. OzzyClean is able to cope with heavy wash days and extra visitors. Use your favourite cleaning products while it waters your garden. OzzyClean is environmentally friendly, hidden in the garden, no noise and no smelly odours.
For an effective, efficient and environmentally friendly sewerage system, call your local agent. Merch Plumbing and Roofing.
Call into Castec Rural Supplies, Mount Gambier, Narracourt and Penola, offering on-farm delivery. Castec Rural Supplies stock an extensive range of broadacre, pasture and horticulture chemicals, plus animal health supplies, fertiliser and stockyard equipment. Get maximum productivity from your land with advice on fecal egg counts, blood tests and soil and tissue tests. For range, service and advice, you can't go past the experienced local team at Castec in Mount Gambier, Narracourt and Penola.
G'day, Brad Smart from Zobel, Mount Gambier. You know, for years we've helped literally thousands of local people get the most affordable loan for their home, car, business and much more. There's a good reason we're the #1 loan broker in regional SA. We work for you, we don't work for the banks. Trying to work out what the banks are really offering is a confusing, time-consuming task. Leave it to us so you can get back to the things that really matter.
Imagine the flexibility of the Honda Jazz, plus Bluetooth compatibility, fog lights, a sporty grille and alloy wheels. Presenting the Jazz Limited Edition.
Prostate cancer is one of the biggest killers of men in Australia. Help us continue the vital work we're doing by hosting a barbecue this September and donate at prostate.org.au. The difference is you.